Right, Katie, you can hear us?
Yep.
Great. All right, good evening, everyone. Kim, so what's the? Space? Okay. All right, welcome everyone to April's executive committee meeting. I'm Jessica Chait, chair of the board. As everyone, most everyone should know, we continue to adopt our hybrid meeting policy with members of the public and press invited to join remotely. Excused committee members and members of the public will still be able to participate virtually, and board members who are joining via Zoom, we ask that you leave your cameras on. If anyone has questions about our hybrid policy, it is found on our website, and the meeting is streaming on our YouTube channel live and the transcript recorded, and will live there in perpetuity and be accessible to the public. We're going to just jump right into tonight's agenda. We have a little bit of unusual business from PLP, which I'm going to turn it over to Frank, that due to the timing, we needed to bring to executive.
Yes. Sorry to trouble you folks with this. As I've mentioned in some of our other meetings, under the new rules for roadway guiding, we need to get the committee board recommendation to the DOT within 30 days of getting the application, and the DOT will not let us extend that deadline. So in this case, we need to get our recommendation in before the next PLP meeting, which is why I'm asking it to be approved here. This is a pretty non-controversial roadway guiding application. I was visited by two DLP committee members, including our new co-chair, Wendy Gonzalez, and they found it's in compliance with the rules. We also got an email from the West 100, the 100 West 17th Street Block Association, which is on this block, and said they have no objection to the application. So I would suggest we recommend approval of it as submitted by the applicant.
So moved. I will second that.
Great. All in favor?
Marty, no?
Okay, any opposed?
One.
All right, and any abstaining?
Katie, are you voting?
I'm not excused, so I'm not voting.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question for Frank.
Sure.
Frank, is there any reason that the board cannot ask for a change to those rules to get the 45 days, which is standard? I know that before.
No, we made that point. We and every other committee board endlessly made the point when the rules were being set that we just didn't have enough time.
Right.
But if, as we fear, the rules come up for revision soon, we will definitely be a point we're making. We just don't want to open that Pandora's box of changing the rules until the industry forces us to do it, because
I just meant just a comment here.
Which would be soon.
it will be soon.
Right.
But yeah, we were all over that when the rules were proposed and pointed out we got nowhere. What makes a little less sense is that sidewalk cafes give us 45 days and roadways are only 30. A distinction that no one has been able to explain to us.
When it's only for 9 months.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Next, is yours?
Yeah, I don't see the doors here, and I'm staying there, so.
She has any
Checked.
Okay, in that case, we'll move to the third item, in the interest of keeping us moving. Which is the response to the NYCHA Fulton LHLC draft environmental impact statement. I'll turn it to Greg, who's really driving this forward on behalf of the board, and just remind everyone, this is where we, in terms of where we are in the process, this is not Euler, which I think everyone in this room is probably familiar with, but certainly people are joining or watching online. We are not yet at that phase. This is really about assessing the environmental impacts to the proposed project and the alternatives. So with that, Greg, maybe you can give us an update on what's happened since we last met and where we are.
Yeah, we started saying that at the Chelsea Land Use Committee meeting, we engaged in a focused review of the draft environmental impact statement. I want to acknowledge every member of the committee for their effort before and during the meeting to give their feedback as to different sections of the whole document, as they sort of reflected on what it was that was offered and not offered in the statement. I also want to acknowledge too, because it relates to our last meeting, we also opened our session with public testimony. Two, so we made sure in this particular circumstance that members of the public, all members of the public had an opportunity to weigh in. Thank you for that suggestion. We were able to do that. There is no shortage of concerns about this particular statement, this particular moment. I would not suggest that there was one section that doesn't for us flag flaws, concerns, details that are absent and need to be dug into more deeply. I guess I would say the first thing that struck us that I do think is important to say is that of all the different sort of options, and credit again to this board for pushing NYCHA and pushing in this statement to have a number of different options associated with this particular project. 6 alternative options. There was a no action alternative, there's the rezoning, there's non-rezoning, there's mid-block. There's also a rehabilitation and infill. I guess I just want to flag, perhaps the biggest concern is that that was just determined outright financially infeasible by the statement itself. So what has been communicated often, what was driving, I think, some of what the working group started this conversation with was almost essentially thrown out right from the start. And I think our committee and the public had specific concerns about that. Specific to the actual statement itself, there are some things that the statement does say are going to cause significant adverse impacts. And that includes shadows. That includes the demolition of historically significant buildings, that's Elliot Chelsea houses. It flags traffic congestion and pedestrian circulation impacts, and obviously noise issues related to construction. Again, there's much more to be said, section by section, about concerns, but even just on a surface level. First, things that we wanted to see in terms of the exploration of this plan were not covered, and there are some specific significant adverse impacts that have been identified. In terms of next steps in this process, we are collecting feedback and responses. Thank you to all the different committees that have weighed in. There's much more to be gathered and organized. And the goal at this particular moment is to have a working draft of a letter response by the end of this week. Understanding that on Friday, we'll have a working draft. And with the 8 pages from waterfront and I know it's gonna be even better before it's over.
Yes.
I literally like that. We'll have a working, I expect that, I've cleared my schedule for the weekend, so I can continue to tinker as we go. But the goal is to get this in front of the board, so we have something to talk about our next board meeting.
It's been a great collaborative process, like piles of people getting on this.
Weighing in every way, shape, and form.
Before, I know we're gonna get to a discussion, can I say one thing? This is the first meeting I watched for Clue and I was there all the time. Greg did, I don't know if you guys, Greg did a fantastic job. I mean, like, for jumping into that,
In the
like,
middle of insanity, in the middle.
no, but I mean, he like, just for starting, it was like really fantastic. I mean, I just wanna say that.
To everyone who intervened when there were disruptions and helped to keep us moving forward, thank you. It was a challenging meeting, but I do feel like every bit of content we got, save for the disruptions, which were not helpful, and just sort of siphoned away time, I think we covered a lot of ground, and it's just the beginning, so.
Disruption is such a polite term.
Listen, it's all about being polite, about what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I want to second that. I mean, I thought
Yeah.
the meeting was just amazing.
All in favor?
And I just want to ask a question. How come the trees is not kind of unmitigated issue? I don't understand that. You remove 300 trees, old trees,
It came up a number of
60.
times, we'll talk
60
about.
years trees, and it doesn't come up as unmitigated.
Page 4, paragraph B in our.
We're gonna include everything, Christine,
No,
because
no,
that's
no, I'm
so.
just shocked that
Yes,
from a process, from a CEQR standpoint, that it wouldn't come up as, this is a major issue, right?
Do they consider replanting as a mitigation?
No,
No,
but you can, even replanting, if the trees are 60 years old, this is like a major issue, right?
It's not equally shocked.
Well, I was just gonna say that there are a number of things in there, and I think we'll continue to
Okay.
call those
Which
out
I'm not.
in the process. And I wanted to also mention for those who, many people actually around this room and throughout the board membership attended the 2 hearings which were in person this week, and I wanna thank you all for doing that. We've said it past meetings, it's so important to really, this is a very complex project and really spending the time, like, it's easy to have gut reactions to the material, but really digging in and spending the time is so important. And I saw so many folks there, and of course, there's still one coming up. They did have to change the schedule, so the virtual one is in 10 days, I think. The 8th. So if you're interested in either, we did have board members who gave testimony, but also just want to hear the kinds of comments and the nature of the comments. Those were very well attended, and would encourage you to participate. And sorry, the point I wanted to make is that there are a number of things that are very surprising, like the tree example that just seems infeasible, that there are not, direct consequences that will need to be addressed should the project move forward. And I know Josephine is running a few minutes late today, but she has spent time with the school issue and really exploring that, which is not just a concern about the stated number of seats and the change to that, but also some of the concerns that she has about the impact perhaps to losing kids to the school because of a result of construction in the interim. And again, she's closer to that. I don't know if Nat, if you have any details you want to share,
I
but
think Josephine, she attended the meeting that's related at PS 33, so I think she's best to speak about sort of that conversation, but yeah, it's concerning.
but and I use that not to debate all of that here. You can come back, we'll continue to have this as part of the agenda, and obviously you'll see the full letter as part of the full board, but the complexity is real, and we really need to, as everybody's looked at each of these sections, or a committee has looked at these sections, to really call those out, because it is concerning.
We went to the Fulton and went to the LA-Chelsea, and at Fulton, 30 people spoke, 2 were in favor. At LA and Chelsea, 54 people spoke, 2 were in favor. So, and I haven't been at meetings in a while to hear that depth of emotion and like desperation from tenants about this. And any elected official, and very few elected officials are there, reps, just Carl Wilson and Yadira from Tony Simone's office at LA Chelsea. It was shocking how people felt. The other thing I wanted to note is on the schools, the president of the PTA reached out to me at that meeting. They were going to do a follow-up discussion, the HHHS. Those of us who were been around a moment did PS 51 and ended up having to relocate PS 51 during the course of construction of Gotham West. And we know that the kids are not going to be able, if this construction happens in this way, to be able to be there. And the fact that the EIS says there will be minimal impact, when we have direct experience in another massive project in Hell's Kitchen, that it's incredibly foolish. We can plan better no matter what's going to happen here. So,
Maria was at both hearings.
yes, she was.
Yes, I was.
I just have one more note, and just something to remember for the upcoming virtual meeting as well, which is scheduled for May 8th. I'm sorry, for virtual public thing, on May 8th on this topic. So I know the one we were at, the first one, NYCHA gave out the wrong date that comments were due and had to correct it. And I just flagged that to say, they changed it only because we made an issue of it, that they said the wrong date. Because the date got extended, because the original thing got pushed back a week. So I just, it just strikes me that, what if we hadn't said it again? And I just want to be sensitive to that. It's the 19th now, it's not, maybe, 1 week is all, there was a make. I think it does make a difference. I think that is something we have to be precise about. So if anybody's on the virtual hearing, just listen, because they were reading off the deck. The deck had the old date, but they didn't update it. I just want to note that, because that's.
I would
So
note
you
it
get
as a
that
theme.
That's what it has to be.
Yeah, it's important to know the date, but also it's just indicative
It's
of.
the constant, not like, yeah.
And we need to all be watchguards to make sure whether it's on
Yeah,
this or other.
you are going to circulate the dates, right? The real.
Yeah, I
dates.
think we did
We
in
did.
an email, but this will
No,
go
getting
to,
closer to.
yeah,
Yes, we-
and this is gonna go to full board, as we said, on the 7th. We'll also have a hearing as part of the DEIS, as part, at the beginning of that meeting, so it'll be another opportunity, particularly for people who haven't spoken. at other committees to make sure that their comments are heard for our submission.
Also, the one odd thing is, I was shocked, in this presentation, done in 2 nights, not one image was shown of what the developments will be. It was all text. So if you didn't know what it was, you would have, and the presenter was the presenter from earlier last year, who spoke in a way like in a monotone, that she was not engaging anyone whatsoever. I had many tenants come to me like saying, what?
That makes me nervous that this is just.
Yep.
Performance, I mean, this is.
Yeah, this is
It's-
performance,
It's
right?
just like not, they don't, why do we?
So we're gonna have more comments about NYCHA after, but if you have more comments on this specific, on the DEIS.
Yes,
and
I just have one, because
Leslie,
it's going off the tree. We commented on it in our thing, but was there any wind study? Like, or no, there's no wind
No,
study,
they
right?
don't
know.
That really disturbed us
Because it
because,
didn't come up in the scope.
gotcha, that's what I
It's
was
not in the
wondering.
scope, it's on the EIS.
Because that's large with the wind, it's crazy, and that there was nothing talked about the wind, that
These tall
Reminder
buildings
for next
surrounded by small ones are in that wind shear. That ain't a question.
we sent a bit.
Candace?
I had a Jim Morris meeting, but I did notice that, the tenants that did come in that needed the hearing, they weren't, the
Translation.
translation, they weren't letting, it wasn't working at the time.
Yeah.
They weren't, like, there was one woman, I was like, you know, she needs translation, I had to go get it herself, myself for her. It was just a lot of that, and I probably did it for like at least 4 or 5, you know, people that were for the translations and letting them know that it wasn't working and that they couldn't hear and this and that. They had a lot of problems with that, so.
Are those things something we should be flagging for the VP, for the board president? Saying we are having those issues, I mean, the dates.
It's not the BP yet, because it's the DEIS. It's not Mueller, it's NYCHA.
Well, just from a procedural standpoint.
Oh,
Well,
oh,
we can raise,
Yeah.
I mean.
Say, hey, we have a problem, this agency is not
Yeah.
doing, you know, the proper
like the
job.
basic,
Right,
yeah,
right.
We do have a meeting with the applicant, which our electeds are expected to attend on Friday, and maybe that's something we can raise. It's a bit of a distraction from the
Yeah.
bigger
Yeah.
issues, but I think we can do follow up and say that. Because in fact, we've talked about the need for translation, and they're like, oh, all of our meetings are translated, but if it's not
If they're
effective,
working.
then
They are not.
it's not.
We're there.
Yeah. Yeah, were there any, sorry, was there anyone? Okay, nobody else. Okay, okay, so thank you, Greg. If anybody's not gotten their comments in this planning, as you can hear, it's really gonna be quite
yeah.
a tune, so.
Sorry, just a process question. So assuming a draft goes, or just I'm reading everyone's notes, I can't believe how much you have to compile, but so thank you so much. But assuming you get a draft out, but assuming you get a draft out by Friday, Saturday, I assume so that, you know, to spare, you know, on a back and forth at the actual meeting, that you'll accept comments
Yeah,
between the draft and the meeting, like normal. Okay.
I think we need to operate.
And even after. Yeah, because look at errors.
Right, because we have to start that with like a public hearings piece, and then I just, we're never gonna be able to get through sooner. We could spend 3 hours just focused on this, and that's not the best
And
strategy.
everyone's written in a different voice. That's my job.
Everyone's been one.
How they express it, yeah, gotta figure out a way to make it one
So
voice.
to go to the board meeting, and then you're
That's your
teaching
job.
the voices, then it's just layer from there, so we'll just have to get through it, and we assume that will adopt as much as we can.
Okay,
I was impressed by the number of good writers we have in reading all that. That was an amazing set of stuff.
And poets.
Oh, it's just.
okay, Greg, thank you, and thank you, everybody else. Before we move on to our next item, I just, Reza, I'm not sure if you heard, but we actually, I think we voted already on Shiraz Kitchen, and that passed here, and so you're welcome to stay on and listen, but,
No, I thank you very much. I appreciate all of them. No, I don't want to, if I can just take off. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Okay, with that, okay, now we're gonna move, I think we have Dolores, joining us, and she is gonna, walk us through some proposed amendments to regulations, related to the cannabis task force.
That's my cue, huh?
Hi, Dolores.
All right, I'm sorry for the bright light, but it is sunny outside, so. Essentially, we did not get a chance to vote. Actually, I'm going to rephrase that. We did not take up the issue of a comment period that is coming from an OCM, not resolution, an OCM proposed change to proximity rules. And the reason why we did not is honestly, I was not prepared at the task force meeting, and neither were the rest of the participants to go ahead and take that vote. So just to give everybody in a nutshell, and apologies, Jesse, I don't know if the draft letter that I put together had been added for folks to view.
Yes, it has.
Okay. So essentially, there had been an opportunity to make some changes to proximity rules earlier last year. That was back in the fall. There was a comment period, and the majority of the comments that came back to OCM really pushed back, were very disturbed by what seemed like more of a lax approach. So they went back to the drawing board and came back with some restrictions that were responding to that pushback. But within that, in particular, is a major change, which is the proximity between where licenses can be offered. So at this point in time, a license will not be issued within 1,000 feet of each other. And this is so that we do not have oversaturation of legal cannabis retail in any one particular area. The proposal is deeming that the distance should only be 500 feet. So essentially cutting that in half. And what we thought was important as a task force, and furthermore for the whole board, is to make a comment. One of the things we most consistently have heard, whether people have been for or against any particular applicant, is the concern of whether or not a particular location is too close to another location. Also, as noted at many meetings, what they're also close to, whether they're close to schools. Obviously, that's part of the regulation, whether they're close to places of worship, part of the regulation, but then also parks, which is not. So the letter that we drafted, after just all taking a look at the specifics and also being guided by a resolution that had already been drafted by Community Board 2, it was drafted to particularly comment on that proximity reduction and why we are opposed to it. There are some other comments that speak to the concerns about how the community voice in the language and what they're taking out of this particular section may have an impact. It's not a direct removal of notification or of the time period that a community can speak, but it also, what it essentially does is it takes away some of the metrics or priorities that would be things we would care about, like whether or not it's close to parks, etc. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions. And if someone hasn't read the letter, happy to, it's very short, happy to read parts of it if that is helpful.
Can I just clarify one thing, just to clarify why it's coming to exec? It's not because it needs to be out before full board. It's just going to go to full board still and it'll get voted out. It's just that because at the time that task force wasn't able to vote on it. So we will be able to, the larger board will be reviewing this just like any other letter.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, that's clear.
Katie?
Okay, just.
Oh, sorry, I saw Katie.
Yeah. Okay, you're online, we'll do online. You're on.
I'm sorry, yes, me? Just a quick question, Dolores. So you mentioned about, it sounds like you're saying you want it to, that the letter says that we should keep it at 1,000 feet. And also you're adding, or we're asking for it to be 1,000 feet from parks. And am I right that in the past it hasn't said anything about parks?
No, we weren't asking that specifically. That we really stuck to exactly what it is that they're ruling about. What they're proposing, which is this limit change, but also made commentary that we're concerned that some of the language that they're removing does restrict or diminish the community input about things that we're concerned about. And I mentioned as an example, parks.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
In the room, Jesse, then we'll go on.
So it's from what I remember, Dolores, it's been a while. Isn't there currently in the rules an exemption for like meaning a particular applicant can apply to be closer than 500 feet, and then if you meet certain criteria that you could actually, you know, there, like, meaning that there already is a mechanism within the current rules. If there's some extraordinary circumstance, and if that is true, maybe we should call that out and say, we already have what we need, there's no need to change this, you know?
So I'll be honest, I'm not sure if that is something that's in there, because I was limiting this very specifically to the change. And even if it is, and I agree that if that's the case, we should probably educate the letter a little bit better and provide that. But even so, my biggest concern, or at least also what I'm hearing from CB2 folks, their biggest concern is that we will end up with oversaturation if we make these changes. And honestly, why are these changes happening? They're probably happening because they need to move product, you know, to protect the farmers that have invested so much into this industry. And we get it, we understand that. But that doesn't mean that we will have community acceptance of cannabis every 500 feet. And I think that based on commentary from majority of the folks that do come to the meetings, they were almost comforted by the fact of knowing if one is approved, they would not see one that close and there wouldn't be that much of the product available. So to directly answer your comment, Jesse, I think that, yes, I should probably look that up. And if that's the case, add that in there. But I don't want to take away from the fact by saying, well, there's a mechanism already in place, so we're good. I think I want to make more of the point of, why are you reducing this when there's already an issue or concern that's been raised in this community? And that may lead to the oversaturation, which is what people are looking to avoid.
Understood.
Yeah.
Just a point of clarification. So are there, in the rules currently, are there regulations around the distance between a licensed operator and a school? And is that 1,000 feet? No.
It's less.
It's less.
It's less and it has to be on the same street.
Yeah.
It can't be around the corner, it can't be, they wrote it in a way that's supposed to, I'm sorry, Dolores, I'm jumping.
No, it's fine. It actually says road. It doesn't say street. It's a road.
It's a state, because it's a state agency or state permitting, they use language that really doesn't work particularly for urban environments, but yeah, it's about 500 feet, it has to be on the same road lane, so.
I see.
So if it was, so we've had situations where if it's on 10th Avenue next to, I'm just using this as an example, Avenue School, that triggered the 500 feet. If it's around the corner from a daycare, that's not, whether it's within 500 feet or not, doesn't matter.
Got it.
And it's linear, and it's linear,
one
while
side of the
1,000 feet is not how the
radius,
how the birds.
And it's one side of the street.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay.
So actually, to your point, Matt, one of the things that we recognize is this letter is coming to full board so that we would have the ability, if it passes, to comment during the comment period, which ends in the middle of May, and we wouldn't have time to meet again. But your exact comment about whether or not there are just as lengthy distances for schools, et cetera, or how that's defined, those are things that probably we should, as a task force, take up to start to define what are the things that we are comfortable with, what are the things that we aren't, and create a guideline for what we would like to see going forward for when folks come and apply.
Okay, great. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. So my first two questions maybe aren't relevant to this letter, but is there any changes to the teeth in shutting down illegal operators? Is this part of this process right now?
Unfortunately, no, and that's why I made the letter really narrow, because even on the OCM's website, it says if you're commenting on comment period, be specific about what section you're commenting on and only stick to that, so.
Because also, don't we, the second thing is, again, probably not relevant other than this letter. Don't we consistently have concern about the timing of these licenses coming in and when we can review them and the licenses are granted before we actually comment? Is that's also not part of this consideration, correct?
No, but
No. So
it is not,
that's the
however,
answer.
however, Jesse continually writes administrative letters to point out that, in fact, we have one right now that has opened that we did comment and we actually said no, and it's about to open. So that's
okay. So, but now I want to get to the meat of my questions, though. Is I think we have a 500-foot rule for alcohol establishments, correct? So what is the distinction between the 500 feet for alcohol versus the 1,000 feet for legal cannabis? Why are we separating those two legal issues into two different distances, and why aren't we treating them similar as alcohol?
You can smell it.
Again,
Seriously.
I
Smell is not
think-
a good reason to have a public policy.
I would
Yeah.
just offer,
Yes.
you should attend the cannabis group, and I think that when you're ready to have a discussion on policy on your agenda, that would be the right place to have that.
How we feel.
Well, yeah, you're always
I
welcome
also-
to the meeting, but more importantly, I think the difference is, and this is very unfortunate to the industry. The fact that over 2 years, they did not have the ability to open up legal shops and illegals have shown up, the broad public does not know the difference. The broad public is unhappy with what they've seen. So folks that are coming to our meetings that are opposed really don't distinguish between the two. And so if we suddenly say, oh, well, look, we're okay with bars being everywhere, but people are already familiar with what bar behavior is like, and they also know how bad behavior for bars is dealt with. They do not see examples of how that is happening in the cannabis. And in particular, when you have stores that are opening that have been given guidance from the community that they don't want it in that area, and they get open anyway, it just further erodes the trust of the public. So a lot of blah, 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 but really the point is that it is different than bars because bars have been around for a while and how we manage them has been established. And cannabis is still not established yet in terms of how we manage our relationship to this type of retail.
But that's actually why I asked the first two questions before coming to this question.
Just one other thing at that point, I mean, the SLA rule and this rule are different in several ways, and the cannabis rule is generally stricter, and the 500-foot rule is essentially just flips the presumption about whether someone's gonna get a license, and it rarely outright blocks an actual license. So I think in addition to being 1,000 feet, I think the cannabis rule is just generally stricter in this respect for the reasons Dolores just said.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dolores. I see the one line, second to last line about concerns that you mentioned about, not specifically to what you're trying to accomplish in this letter, but about the parks and the schools. I want to piggyback on what, Matt said. That is probably one of the biggest concerns in the community is that there is nothing around parks. There's not, the schools, it's like there are loopholes. It has to be on this side of the street. It can't be around the corner. So you're saying that this letter, you don't think warrants stronger language on that? You're thinking that should be a totally separate letter?
I'm happy to add stronger language. Ultimately, this letter was proposed so that we would be able to provide comment during the comment period. And again, trying to keep it specific to the rule changes. But there is no reason why we cannot add that strong language because it does fit with what we've heard from folks, et cetera. I also just, as an aside, CB2 is working on trying to craft a very specific language around what they would like to see in regards to cannabis near and around parks. And their chair of that task force has been circulating that around to other community boards to try to not a sign-on letter, but in order for us to focus on it as well.
Great. That's
So
awesome. Thank
Marty.
I want to press a little bit what Paul was asking. 1,000 feet is 5 city blocks. How are you defining saturation?
Avenue blocks.
Huh?
Avenue blocks, not.
5 city avenue blocks. The other block is 800 feet. And so that would be a block and a half. But 5 avenue blocks is quite a way. So I'm really just asking you to talk a little bit about what saturation means.
Yep, that's a great point. I have not defined that in the letter. I use the term, and I think that when we speak about it broadly, we're not defining it. Perhaps, again, as Jesse mentioned, the letter will be going to full board for a vote, which means we have a couple days to get that in by the deadline for it to make the packet. That could be something, again, wasn't discussed at committee, and that's why I'm trying to be careful around giving you an answer. So we haven't defined it. But there has been throughout the months commentary, et cetera. Let me talk to the rest of the folks that are on that task force, see if there is a consensus around how we've talked about it in the past, and then add that in an edited letter, which then we can take up at full board for its vote if you guys pass that here.
You're promising a very fun board meeting, right?
No, it's only one letter.
Thank you. Carrie has a question, and then just a reminder, oh, I'm sorry, Christine, and then we'll go to Carrie. Christine?
You know, the whole saturation issue is also related, as you mentioned, to the illegal dispensaries where people feel that there are a lot because they are illegal. So at the end of the letter, could we make a suggestion about that? I know it's not strictly there, but if the numbers are changed, I'd love to include those, the dispensaries which are illegal and have a distance from them. Because if we had that, then there would be an incentive for people to close the illegals.
Sorry, I missed just part of what you were saying to talk about distance between what's there that's illicit and ones that are legal. I missed part of that. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Christine.
Yes. So, you know, you would say, okay, you cannot be more than 1,000 from an illegal one. And now this would be a huge incentive for OCM or whatever the name of the organization
Enforcement, you're saying.
to go enforce it, because then that would preclude them. So I'm not saying it's right in there, but maybe make a suggestion somewhere that you cannot ignore the illegal installation. That's what is causing all the issues.
In spirit, I'm right with you, and I think that logic is spot on. What I'm wondering is, because again, they're only commenting on their rule change, or they're only asking for comments on the rule change. But perhaps how we do that is there is the map of illegal cannabis shops. That's something we can add as an appendix to say this is part of the reason why. And again, there've been a lot that have been closing down. We can make sure that it's dated from the date that snapshot was taken, to say this is why we've have this overwhelming reaction to the concept of oversaturation. So I agree, but I just think, sorry?
And the decision's not made in a vacuum, though, it's just this one, anyway, yes.
Jesse, did you want to say something?
No, I think Dolores got it right. I think the goal is that we're not comfortable with changing.
Right.
The community's not comfortable with changing this until we
Other
see
things
more
are done.
action and
Right,
more
other things are done.
enforcement
Right.
is done. We have Carrie.
Jesse,
I'm sorry.
well, Jesse's one last thing.
Sorry,
And then
sorry.
we'll go to Carrie and we'll close this on. We do need a motion.
I apologize. I also just wanna, it seems to me, Dolores, I've been needing to talk about this, so I wanna talk about it publicly. It seems to me that there really are a number of examples now of OCM granting licenses over our objection. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Right, so I do think it's time that we need to really take that on as an issue, and not because we as a community board should be the ultimate decider of absolutely everything, but really because we are taking so much time to evaluate these applications, and we are not just blanketly rejecting applications, we are actually finding the good operators and finding the right locations. And so the weight of what we are saying really should carry, and we really need to find a way, probably in another letter, to make that clear, because it really is disappointing that this keeps happening. And again, because at this point, it's like, why are we even doing this if we're,
Yeah,
if it's not?
I agree. And Jesse's written some admin letters that have received some responses that are just like basically saying, oh, sorry.
All right, yeah.
And I think we had talked about bringing in borough board and using other boards who might be experiencing something similar to join in that effort. I don't, your point that we're being particularly thorough, I'd want to ensure that others are similarly, if we're gonna align with them on the issue, that we can take that back up. Carrie? Carrie couldn't handle missing an exec.
Sorry?
You couldn't stay away.
Well, I was just gonna hide and listen a little bit, but I just wanted to say one thing about this, what Dolores was just talking about, because that happens to be like on my corner. And one of the reasons that we denied it was that it's a half a block from PS 11. But because the address of the shop is on 8th Avenue and the address of PS 11 is on 21st Street, the 1,000-foot rule doesn't turn the corner.
Ridiculous.
So, I mean, when we think about feet and how far, density and how far apart things should be, like, I don't know how to fix that problem, but that was one of the big issues that the neighborhood had with that location, was it was simply too close to, a very large public school, elementary school. So I just wanted to bring that up so that, to further say we should not continue to minimize that 1,000-foot, even if it's in that case stupid and irrelevant. But
Carrie's point's the most important. It's really making sure we make a comment that we don't reduce from what we already have in place, because that is something that at least when we go to OCM on an issue, we can point to that if there is a license that is that's within 1,000 foot of another one. It gives us a little bit more actually, I was going to say it gives us a little bit more strength in our comment to affect what happens, but we're seeing that we don't have that much sway, but let's not give up anything that we have. So anyone want to entertain a motion so that we can bring this to full board, please?
So moved.
Second,
Janice, thank you. All in favor?
with suggestion, right?
Thank you.
With suggestions.
Right.
Yes and no, right?
And this is
So if
recorded,
you're
so I
going
can go
to-
back and get the suggestions.
Please keep your hand up for just a second.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, any abstaining? Okay. Sorry, JD, were you abstaining?
JD's not voting.
Oh, you're not voting. I'm
JD's
sorry.
not voting because he has no
Yeah,
excuse.
No, sorry. And Peony.
Okay, so I got one no, one abstaining, and one P&E. Is that accurate?
Everyone else is yes.
Okay.
I know I'm done, but I apologize. For the no, it will help me to understand how to either make our point better or message. Is there a reason for the no on the letter, or is just in principle on cannabis?
We can talk, it'll be a longer conversation.
Okay.
We started the conversation and it was shut down in this group, so we can have a longer conversation about it.
Okay, but if there's something that can help it, that's why we brought it to exec, because the conversation didn't happen at task force. So if there's something that can help,
I
let
feel
me
it's
know.
inconsistent to have a 500-foot rule for alcohol and a 1,000-foot rule for cannabis, but I agree with the 500-foot radius versus street or road as it's technically defined.
Got it. So it's more philosophical on our stance.
On
That's
our
different.
position on how
Got
we
it.
treat these kind of
That's
substances.
helpful. Thanks for letting me ask, even though I didn't
And-
actually
and
ask you that I could ask Jessica.
I would encourage it separate from the comments process, that's open, like that conversation find its way to cannabis, and so that we can talk about what are these substantive issues, whether it's the inconsistency as you see it that you're pointing out, or issues of like, how do we make sure that our feedback is actually valued? And there's like policy and strategy in there that I think should happen and maybe come back to this group. But I think it should happen first, with the people who've been looking and thinking about this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dolores. I know you try to stay away from exec, so thank you for making the time. Okay, with that, we'll go to the chair report. While she is not here this evening, I just wanted to recognize Wendy Gonzalez, who is now co-chairing alongside Frank, and want to, of course, acknowledge for all of the leadership that he brought to BLP these last several years, and very excited to have Wendy in this role. I think she's excited. I know you have your first meeting together, and look forward to welcoming her around this table.
You bring up the issue of Bert and of Betty and others who did fabulous work for the board. What are we doing for them?
I had mentioned at the last meeting that once we will be acknowledging them. We're hoping to do that at the May meeting. I'm happy to talk offline
Full board meeting.
about that. I've invited both Bert and Betty to be present in person so that we could appropriately acknowledge their contributions. That's their choice and, you know, based on their own availability and schedule, to see if whether or not they'll be there, but I hope they will.
Thank you.
Wanted to flag that tomorrow is the city council land use hearing on Western Rail Yards. I'm sure many of you have seen some of the news stories that there's related has gone back and is now proposing using a pilot model, payment in lieu of taxes, to fund the platform and have increased the proposed housing from 1,500 to 4,000 units. We have not yet received, we did get a heads up that they were gonna be making these modifications. We are working on scheduling a briefing with them so that we can really dig into what's being proposed. Several of us from in this room will be present tomorrow to both offer testimony consistent with the letter we passed on the former proposal, and then, you know, I just
On the
say,
current proposal, because that's what exists.
well, and we don't have they will be presenting tomorrow on the revised proposal. We have not seen those details, and so obviously as a board, we cannot comment. That has to go back to committee and for further discussion. So, yeah.
Just to clarify, and Jeff was trying to explain this to me before the meeting, but obviously so the vote tomorrow.
There's
it's a
no vote tomorrow. There's no vote.
It's a hearing tomorrow.
It's a-
Oh, okay, no, that's,
Yeah.
But it's the final vote's in May.
yeah,
So
but there's no way it's gonna come back to us before it goes back to like, this is gonna be a strange situation where we have someone voting on something that really doesn't align with what we previously voted on, and that's a problem.
Would it have to go back to city planning? 'Cause it's-
They're not necessarily vote, just because they present something doesn't mean council's taking it up at all, or voting on it.
Well, it's part of the ULIP cycle. This is the ULIP application, they're on the time clock. They have to take out
The
the
ULIP has a proposal in front of us, and that's what's in front of the council. And that they can present something, but as you noted, Matt, there's all kinds of issues about changing ULIP.
Yeah, they would have to go back
Have to go back to
That's
state
what-
planning, and
That's what I'm
all kinds of
asking,
issues.
so sorry, so does the change of,
We haven't, I don't
We
think we
don't-
can speak to
yeah.
that yet because in
Okay.
fact, we haven't
It feels like a
even
press
seen
release.
exactly what changes they are proposing. Is this an alternative? Is this replacement? I don't know. I
Is
think
it
we'll
within
learn.
scope?
I think we will learn more tomorrow, and after tomorrow, we'll then learn even more when we sit down with them and really go through these details and figure out, does that come back to committee? Are there other things that have to happen, as you're noting with
But if I can
planning?
just clarify that, it did come out of CPC, this revision is a result of what CPC voted out.
No.
Now,
Yeah, they made a site plan change at CPC. And that split pedestal building is what they're now proposing, but they've changed, what I haven't understood yet. The modification of the site plan that came out of CPC, what they voted out is what's being brought forward. I think they're changing one of the towers from commercial to residential to increase the number of residential units. And so they're taking that residential component and tying it into a
But
pilot.
they did not present this issue about the number of apartments at CPC, but they may have done a site plan change.
Correct.
So it's very
But
different.
but CPC is saying the site plan change could accommodate either housing, commercial or casino. And this is their site plan change that is being brought forward as an alteration to the ULIP. But the problem is that we don't have any of the details of it. So-
Also, those
and-
two
and also the
buildings on the
pilot
south side are as of right, but I think we're getting ahead of, we're not really getting ahead of ourselves because the timing is now, but we are very much working on, we will have this hearing tomorrow, we'll get more information. They have committed to have a briefing with us so that we can ask these questions and assess. I've spoken, as I'm sure others have, to our council member who is very interested in understanding what all the proposed changes are and if there could not be even more proposed changes to ensure that the things that were noted in our letter are addressed in addition to the things that they have committed to.
Well, this first to Jesse, and that is. The question I asked is if they made a site plan change at city planning, why did they disclose this portion of the information? That seems rather odd and out of sequence, because normally if you're doing a site plan change to do something, you're saying you're gonna do, right? The second part is, I have not heard from the council member, also has been briefed on this, I did speak about this. And I have not heard him currently interested in understanding parts of it further, because he's very confused as to why this would be brought up 3 days before the public hearing.
I think we all know why it's.
Well, I know that, right?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I had this conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very smart.
I mean,
I think it's smart, it was kind of foolish.
I think
Okay,
the
so-
pilot extension is the newest piece of this, that we really also have to understand better.
So I have a question. The question is that they are proposing, assuming that this is all done in the right sequence, they are proposing to use pilots in order to fund, luxury housing?
We don't know. We just-
But if it was the platform.
And the housing too, they said.
No, but the platform is, for private profits. Usually the pilots are to finance, things which are for the benefit of the people.
Well,
Like
we know they
subway, like that. So I am raising the issue that I don't think this project is applicable to get pilot.
We know they use the pilots on the eastern rail yards.
But that was on Eastern Rail Yard. The
Which-
idea was they paid
The
for the subway
Right.
and they paid for the park. So
Yeah, this is, sorry, that's incorrect. It's not the Eastern Rail Yards. The pilots pertain to all of Hudson Yards. There is a district, HYC
Right.
financing district, that is not the Eastern Rail Yards. That is all of Hudson Yards. And if you build a commercial building anywhere in Hudson Yards, it is it's a pilot. And that goes to,
and does it apply to the Western Rail Yard?
yeah, it applies, no, I'm sorry.
No.
Because they would have done this originally.
No, it doesn't,
so-
it doesn't
The-
apply.
the-
Sorry.
Right.
Because, just the
I
clarification,
know.
because the financing district that was put in place for the Tappan Increment financing, Jesse did not have the Western Rail Yards in it
Right,
in 2005, because that was not part of the plan.
right.
But it's not just Eastern Rail Yards, it's everything in Hudson Yards that pays pilots to pay for the bonds,
Yeah.
for the subway and the parks. So the question, Christine, is, we don't know what their intention is, but they could say they're using it to create the park or something. Who the hell knows? We have no idea. The fact that it's so last minute is a suspect part of it.
And we
Okay.
will have a briefing where we will
Yeah.
dig into these issues, and I think that's where we are in this process.
Well, this was a qualified comment for tomorrow.
Well, I think
We don't want to be raising
Yeah.
things that.
I don't want to
No,
respond
I
to
would
this.
say, actually specifically, and I'm glad you're raising this, and just to note, we were asked by the, press outlets to give a comment. We haven't been briefed.
Right.
So our position is our position as it was when we voted on our most recent letter on the proposal we have. Any comments given tomorrow on behalf of the board should reflect what we voted on,
Okay.
and we can acknowledge, because in the hearing, I do anticipate that they're gonna talk about changes. We can acknowledge in that testimony that we
Can't
look
speak to it.
forward to digging in more, or, whatever it may be, but we are not in a position, we haven't seen anything as a board, approved
We have
anything
not
as a board.
voted anything.
And so, we have to remain
Right.
consistent with
Okay.
our raising our former concerns in the hope that any plan going forward will address them. Leslie?
I think we have to be very, very careful here, and I think we have to be very vigilant, because what is happening is when we comment on this, we had a list of comments like this, but when we kept talking, our narrative was no housing, no housing, no housing, and more housing. Now, we have to be very careful, because last minute, they're gonna say, even though that's the one big thing, but we also have all these problems here with it, right? But that was our narrative, and that's what everyone said, we're gonna go with that as the main thing, which is fine, but now, like, at the 12th hour, they are saying, okay, more housing, it's gonna be whiplash, I think, they're gonna say, wait, CB4, you said if there was more housing, you would be fine now, so you must be fine, and I think it's gonna be quick. It's only a month, right? I mean, I just think we have to be very prepared of how we're going to now
it's
counter. Go ahead, sorry.
It's less than a month.
Right.
And I think it's important for us to say, I want, in my testimony, I'm noting that the community board was briefed with related multiple meetings over many, many months about Western Rail Yards, and they were explicit that they could not do this.
But they're gonna say, so what? Here it is now.
No.
Here it is now.
They were good, say there was a pilot, now we're getting.
Yes, right, exactly, Christine, that's exactly what they're gonna say.
I think our response is, they made it clear they could not do it, and it is more than suspect to raise this at this point in time.
I would just offer that I think our comments, and with some of us who are planning to be there tomorrow should stay behind after this evening's meeting to strategize, but our comments should be specifically about the things that we were either concerned about or want to see. And I don't think we should be commenting on whether it's suspect or not, but rather our concerns that need to be met, and that was what we voted out.
And
I think we can say
of note, there were a list of unmitigated adverse impacts. Those are the things we talked about at planning. The housing message was a political strategy. It
And
wasn't the
none of those go,
message to
and none of those
CPC.
mitigations go in.
The message still has to be there are unmitigated adverse impacts. That those exist no matter what.
Yeah.
So that's what we can focus on and we can play into whatever.
It was a very long letter. There is
Yeah,
a
a
lot,
lot.
but I'm not concerned. about the
Yeah.
number of issues
None of these
that we
issues get
raised.
resolved because of this change. in
Their
law.
narrative.
But
They're gonna.
there is spinning, this little,
Yeah.
we got
Yes.
it.
Exactly.
But
And
the-
then,
Jesse.
I'm just more concerned, for me, it's just more of the process concern is the concern here of I took a vote and we all took a vote on one particular thing. And without, I don't want it moving ahead without a chance to reevaluate the new proposal and whether that works, if that's a clearer message that we have
I
to
would
send
just
to our
know-
council member, that's
Yeah.
something we have to do.
It's not a
I
proposal.
would just note that that happens in ULURP anyway, that negotiation of proposed changes, and we don't get to have this, it doesn't come back to us,
Yeah.
just as a process standpoint. We do sit typically with the council member and others to continue to advise about what would be acceptable given the concerns we raised. This is a little bit different, obviously, it's also very public what they've done here, and so I do, again, they have committed to come back and present, we have to figure out how and when and all of those things, but like, I hear you, and I
Yeah,
hear
it just
why.
feels,
some
it just feels
people,
weird that I
but-
voted on something that doesn't exist in,
Yeah. And also that would normally,
was
that will
their-
happen.
The fact that you say that,
You really think that this is just a
no,
press
no, the
release
fact
and
that
that's just
the
not
fact that you
like-
say it is fulfilling what they're trying to accomplish.
Yes,
And I
exactly.
wanna say that this is not the normal ULURP thing where we then go through all these mitigations and issues and try to figure out subsequent to the hearings to get to the final agreement. This is a showboating, something to divert everybody to say, oh, it's a new plan, let's look at it. It's really, really over the top and it's a bad negotiation move, and I don't think they really, that the council is appreciating at this point.
Okay, okay, well, okay, so if you're planning to go tomorrow or interested in going, please stay behind. I just quickly wanted to know, I will probably mention it every month, but the Port Authority Construction Task Force continues to meet. I think the meeting is tomorrow for this month. If you have concerns.
Wednesday.
Excuse me, Wednesday. I was thinking, yes, Wednesday. Christine and Jesse represent the board from that, but also if you're hearing issues or no businesses that haven't been, felt that they've been participating, or you are walking by the neighborhood and see things, those are the folks to bring your feedback to. Just a quick comment that the board engagement task force has continued, or working group has continued to mine the survey data and is now going to be conducting focus groups, and I want to thank them for their enthusiasm and all of you for taking the time to complete the survey. We had a meeting today with landmarks regarding the potential for landmarking as part of the MSMX process. There was an announcement last week that they are looking to landmark 5 significant buildings. We were disappointed that there weren't more, and really use this opportunity together with our council member to advocate for the broader list of buildings which we want to see preserved in anticipation of the rezoning there. I don't know if Joe or Paul or you have anything else you want to say?
We were told the same thing about 5 times, about the 5 buildings.
Yeah.
We thanked them about 8 times.
Yeah.
And I did follow up with the council member who said we need to get more because we asked for more. And we have no landmarks in those kitchens. So, and I said it's gotta be a transactional discussion with them because they just kept saying that they're done basically. So
Yeah.
it was very hard to.
Yeah, they were not really open. They sort of,
But the buildings are all in Chelsea, is that what it is? Or they are in CB5?
All of them are mostly in Chelsea. Or in CB5, but yeah, not in others.
No, I got it, but.
okay. And then on the topic of NYCHA, we did cover a lot with regards to the DEIS, but we are still working on scheduling our public meeting that we had town hall that we had talked about that has been incredibly, sneezing on the truth, incredibly difficult to schedule, probably deliberately so, but we continue to try to do that to provide an in-person town hall option. We did have to push back a date we had because it was not secured, but we wanted to push it after, hopefully you all saw my note, until after the DEIS process. And we're just really suffering as a result of schedules and probably will. I did want to note that we are meeting with Hudson Guild. If anybody saw the letter that we got back in response to the board letter with a number of questions about the project, they said that the MOE so we have a meeting with Ken Johnson, who says his board has been very involved, and to hear from them as to how they're feeling about the process. Josephine, before you came in, we talked a little bit about the schools and that you've been participating in the conversations there. Obviously, what we said earlier was that all of that should, from the environmental impact perspective, be sure to be noted so that it could be, thoroughly reviewed and studied, but also really grateful that you're so close to that. And it's also just a reminder for the two, for HHS and CLU, that obviously all of these other committees, as reflected in the experience of the DEIS and all the contributions, there are a lot of community stakeholders that need to be engaged and considered as part of this process. We are meeting on Wednesday. Eric Botcher is hosting a policy discussion with Lisa Bova-Hyatt, who is the senior person at NYCHA. It's supposed to be a policy discussion, which is really a place where some of those conversations, I believe, around the debate between Section 8 and Section 9 and PACs can be explored. And I think that they're taking questions, submissions ahead of time. So certainly if anybody here has topics that they want to get a better handle on, I would encourage you to submit questions there and tune in. It's at 5 o'clock on Wednesday. On Friday, for months we were having these conversations with the applicant at NYCHA, with elected officials and former tenant leadership. We've taken a bit of a hiatus for various reasons. We are meeting this Friday to resume that process and hopefully identify a path forward for both more community engagement as well as understanding, the council members stood up at our board meeting last month saying there were 4 areas that he wanted to see the project make substantive changes in, and to understand together as a group with the applicant what is the process and the way that we can do that substantively before we get to you. So that meeting is on Friday. Josephine.
This is sort of a process related question. So we are submitting these comments, and then I'm kind of curious, well, a lot of people are curious after that, exactly what happens, because there's this feeling that this is just sort of a process that the developers required to do, and then they're going to go ahead and do whatever they want to do anyway. And there are some very, very serious concerns with the future of this school if this project goes through. So basically, like what the superintendent wants to know is like, what's the timeline? So the comments are submitted, and then what happens?
I don't think there is a time on the timeline, like unlike ULURP, which has 45 days or something like that. The time to review the feedback is not, I don't believe is prescribed. And so as an example, last year we thought when we were doing the draft scope of work for this process that we were gonna have what we're doing now back in the fall, or late, actually summer.
Our comments on the scope, we thought we'd get months and months earlier.
Like summer, and that actually took 9 months longer. So I don't think we know how long it's gonna take them to review everything, but we know that once they do, they need to submit it as part of their package to HUD. And it's for HUD's review related to, I'm sure among others, but related to the dispensation of property.
Okay, so will there be any changes made to the, like Chelsea, Elliot in general, without HUD approval? Like, I understand that there could be a demolition of a building.
There cannot be, no, it is federal property and it cannot be demolished without HUD approval.
Yeah, we secured that information 2 weeks ago when tenants were in the senior building were told demolition being in July.
Right.
We were
Yes.
told that, and we looked into it clearly. I spoke to legal aid, to Lucy Newman.
Right.
Until there's section 18 approval, even though it's as of right without the zoning, they cannot do it. So, and I know that the school was told construction will begin in July.
Right.
It's a lie. It's a lie, and that we have to let them know that. That's the PTA president. I spoke to her at the one meeting. She's very upset about this, but that's what they were told. It's gonna start in July.
So I seem to recall reading somewhere that they were hoping for the final EIS in August of 2025. I may be, so August of 2025 would be the final EIS. And from that is what alternative they would suggest would be the primary. So whether they choose the non-rezoning, the rezoning, the mid-block from the final EIS would be the plan. They try to move forward to the next step. So that's where this draft EIS changes is really kind of important for us to be taking into consideration what direction we want to go.
And they can't start the ULURP without the EIS being approved. Period. They really can't.
And Josephine, we can talk afterwards
I
about.
was going to ask for EIS approval, like they did for the Port Authority. They said, we want all the local approvals
They want the local entitlement.
before bless the project.
Well, it's a different administration now, but we
Yeah.
can hope that
Yeah.
that's.
I mean,
I would say that's fine. That one was a little.
Yeah, let's go raise the school, hey, on Twitter.
But we can talk offline about like what, like, because they can build some of the as of right buildings. If they
Yeah,
were,
for section 18.
if they were to build them as infill, meaning what's
As
keeping it
infill,
is
yes.
as what's keeping them from being able to
Demolition.
demolish is that it's federal property and the federal government has to approve that. And in order for that to happen,
It's not federal property, it's public authority property, but there's a covenant with that property that requires the section 18 approval.
sorry, I'm referring to the building as property as opposed to the land, but
No, both.
no.
None of it's federal property whatsoever. It's New York City public housing.
That's very technical.
Very technical.
So, okay, the last thing I wanted to mention, so tune into the, yeah.
I have a question about that. So we know those little bits of information. How do we share that with all the tenants, et cetera, where everybody is hysterical? Oh, is it going to be my building or not? Or is it going to be the school? How do we share that information with, the population?
We actually have been,
No, I'm talking about I don't.
we have been doing this in public meetings. It says come up in public meetings. Tenants have come and said, they have been informed, they have to move by a certain date. We said in public, not correct. And there's a lot of organizing happening out there through the block association, CRDC.
But should we have something in writing so that people can circulate a piece of paper?
On Thursday, HHS is taking this up. I think you can discuss it there. I would also say, like, I think it would be really important to hear from HOU, to hear from the applicant what their message to tenants are. We're also asking them, not through committee, but for a schedule of events, and because they are engaging with tenants, and so how do we become part of that?
And also, how do we make sure they are not saying one thing which is a lie and the
We've
real?
heard it, we've heard it already.
Right,
I
but
will
I think we need to.
I mean, I have not yet been able to go to Elliot Chelsea meetings due to schedule conflicts, but at the Fulton meetings, it is a nuanced message that they're offering, I think, but around dates, but it's. If you are panicked, it's easy to not be or to think you're being misled because the nuance is so good. So I think,
A simplified message would be really good.
Yeah.
How do we make our statement? How do we make our truthful statement stronger than their lies?
I think we bring it up on Thursday and talk about that as a mechanism. What we can do from the board side.
Okay.
And then we're inviting Clue, but really the whole board, if you're interested in this topic, to come on Thursday as part of this discussion at HHS. Okay, with that, those are the chair updates, and I'll turn it to Jesse. For his report.
Hey, everybody, not much to say. So you have the full board agenda in your Dropbox. There's copies here. Take a look, please. Like 90% of it is DLP. It's impressive. We don't get to another committee till item 29. Can you believe it? So that's pretty impressive.
And talk to the bundle.
So, but we are at Pier 57. We should expect a good amount of people coming to the public session, or to the hearing, which will be the, commenting on our, hopefully, what the purpose again is commenting really on the letter that we are proposing, on the comments in the draft, environmental impact statement. And then you also have in your Dropbox, and then we copy to on the desk of the committee schedule for May. From my understanding, and looking at it, checking it 3 times over, because we had to put on links, and then that all committees are meeting on their regular scheduled times. Just one couple things I'd like to mention, that in addition to everything that Jessica said about the PA will be coming to WPE in May to talk about doing an initial overview of the deck over spaces and what that's gonna look like in the future. We're not talking about right now per se, but we're talking about what it's gonna look like in terms of the green space and the open space, which is one of the major commitments to the concessions. And then I think that's it. Again, as I said earlier, as I said in my email, everybody, you know, let me know if a link isn't working, if there's an old link on an agenda, be prepared that that will happen, because we have links everywhere. We had to switch over to all new links, but we're trying to get there. And again, why we're doing all of this is because the VP's office, which is very nice of them, originally Gail did this. She bought all of our license, all the Manhattan boards have Zoom licenses with webinar capabilities, and being able to do running it off the cloud and putting it onto YouTube, all due to Gail's initiative originally during COVID. Mark took that on as well, which is very gracious of him, but they did need to move over to a government license, and so that's why we're having to do that change. I think that's everything that I was gonna talk about in terms of committee schedule, but please take a look at it, make sure your committee is right. Again, it's a snapshot, so I understand we will add stuff. We might need to take away stuff, but it's a snapshot. And please take a look at it on other committees. So if you want, just so you know what else is happening on the board. And I'll just want to reiterate what was said earlier. I think Greg did an amazing job on Flu, with being co-chair only a few months and now being chair and running, you know, what an extensive amount of work that took. And, you know, it's not a silver bullet, obviously, to the project. It's not a silver solution to the project. I don't mean to say we should shoot a bullet at the project, but you know, but it is the work. And you guys, I think, again, that's done the immense amount of work, and it showed that every committee really participated, and every committee really was very thoughtful, and it means, I think it means a lot, and I would hope the community respects and appreciates that.
Yeah. Jesse, you may have already thought about this, but if Pier 57, lights go off at 9:30 at the latest, and if we're gonna have a NYCHA public hearing and 49 liquor licenses and.
Well, it's not gonna be very quick.
Can we?
It's like 1.5 speed.
Can we possibly extend the hours there at all?
I can try, but,
we can't get through a Chelsea Land Use Committee meeting there. When NYCHA's on the
I will just say, Greg hit every item on, every item on that environmental impact statement, every section, had every member of his committee speak, had every member of the public speak, had Maria and Joe speak. And we had to shut down the meeting for minutes. All the cops, blah, 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 and we still were able to do it. So I think we can do it. I want to give us.
You set the bar.
I mean, Greg has set a very high bar for the rest of
Yeah. Unintended consequences, right?
And get home before.
So are they elected to be 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, that's all I have to say.
Well, that is our meeting for this evening. Motion to adjourn for coming. Maria has made a motion to adjourn. Second, Christine, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Enjoy this glorious weather. Oh,
Thank you.
stunning. Thanks, everyone.
How would you do?